Barcelona in the 1700s was a city caught between decline and renewal, a once proud Mediterranean trading capital, struggling under the weight of war, siege, and political suppression. By 1714, following the brutal siege during the War of Spanish Succession, Barcelona's population had fallen to around 34,000 zeo, and the victorious Bourbon monarchy had stripped away Catalonia's ancient liberties. Yet this was also a century of gradual recovery, of resilience beneath occupation, and of a merchant class that refused to disappear. In this video, I use modern AI tools to bring historic paintings, engravings, and prints to life, allowing us to shift perspective, change camera angles, and move through the same scenes in ways their original artists never could. We'll walk through fortress walls, stand in besieged streets, and witness a city learning to survive under new masters while quietly preserving its identity. First, I want to talk about La Ciutadella, the citadel. This view shows the massive star-shaped fortress dominating the northeastern edge of the city by the 1720s. La Ciutadella was complete a massive military fortress, built by Philip V, not to defend Barcelona, but to control it. This view shows the star-shaped fortification from above, its geometric bastions and moats forming perfect symmetry. In the foreground, Spanish soldiers in white uniforms drill in the parade ground. In the mid-ground, the five-pointed walls extend outward, faced with stone and surrounded by water-filled moats. Artillery positions point inward, toward the city, not outward toward enemies. Beyond the walls, you can see the Ribera neighborhood, its streets and houses deliberately demolished to create a clear field of fire. The air smells of gunpowder and damp earth. The fortress was hated. Its construction required tearing down 1,200 homes in the Ribera district, displacing thousands of Barcelona's working families. The citadel symbolized defeat and occupation, a permanent garrison of Spanish troops enforcing Madrid's authority. Locals were forbidden from approaching too close. Soldiers patrolled the perimeter, arresting anyone deemed suspicious. The very existence of La Ciutadella reminded Barcelonans daily that they were a conquered people. The citadel mattered because it represented the crushing of Catalan autonomy. After Barcelona surrendered on September 11, 1714, Philip V abolished Catalonia's parliament, banned the Catalan language from official use, and imposed Castilian laws. La Ciutadella was the physical manifestation of that suppression, a fortress designed to prevent Barcelona from ever rebelling again. Over time, attitudes shifted. In 1069, the fortress was finally demolished after decades of petitions from Barcelona's citizens. The space became a public Parc de la Ciutadella, reclaiming the land for the people. Today, this is one of Barcelona's most beloved green spaces, home to the Catalan Parliament, the Barcelona Zoo, and a massive fountain. You can still see remnants of the fortress. The old arsenal now houses the Parliament building, and the chapel survives as a military museum. But the oppressive walls are gone, replaced by open lawns and shaded paths where families picnic, where soldiers once drilled. This is La Rambla, the tree-lined promenade. By the 1750s, La Rambla was still a seasonal streambed being gradually transformed into Barcelona's central promenade. This view shows the wide avenue running from the harbour up toward the city centre, lined with newly planted plane trees. In the foreground, vendors sell flowers, birds in cages, and fresh produce from wooden stalls. Monks from the convent of Santa Monica walk in their brown robes. In the mid-ground, well-dressed merchants stroll beneath the young trees, discussing business. The Gothic quarter rises to the right, the new walls to the left. The smell of the sea mixes with dust from the unpaved sections still under construction. La Rambla was where different Barcelonas collided, rich and poor, religious and secular, local and foreign. Pickpockets worked the crowds. Beggars congregated near the convents, hoping for charity. Soldiers from the garrison came here on leave, often drunk and looking for trouble. Tensions flared between Spanish troops and Catalan locals, leading to fights and occasional riots that city authorities struggled to control. The promenade mattered because it represented Barcelona's attempt to modernize and beautify itself despite political oppression. While Catalonia's institutions were dismantled, the city's merchant class, growing wealthy from Caribbean trade and textile manufacturing, invested in urban improvements. La Rambla became a symbol of Barcelona's endurance, a place where the city's social life continued despite Spanish occupation. Over the centuries, La Rambla evolved into Barcelona's most famous street. The convents were secularized in the 1800s, replaced by theaters and markets. The Bacria market opened in 1840. The promenade became a tourist destination. Today, La Rambla stretches from Plaza de Catalunya to the Christopher Columbus monument at the harbor, often overcrowded with visitors, but still fundamentally recognizable. You can walk beneath the same plane trees, past the flower stalls that have been here for centuries, and imagine the 18th century merchants and monks who walked this same path. This view shows the Barcelona Cathedral in the Gothic Quarter. By the 1730s, the Cathedral of the Holy Cross and St. Eulalia dominated the Gothic Quarter's skyline. This view shows the cathedral's Gothic facade, though the actual facade visible today wasn't completed until the 1800s. In the 1700s, the entrance was simpler, unfinished. In the foreground, worshippers climb the steps to enter for morning mass. Beggars sit by the entrance, hands outstretched. In the midground, the cathedral's three naves rise behind the facade, topped by an octagonal tower. The cloister garden is visible to the side, where 13 white geese wander, one for each year of St. Eulalia's life. The sound of bells rings out across the quarter. The cathedral was a refuge, but also a reminder of religious control. The Catholic Church had supported the Bourbon side during the War of Succession, and the new regime strengthened church authority in Catalonia. The Inquisition remained active, investigating heresy and enforcing orthodoxy. Jews and conversos lived in fear. Protestant traders visiting from Northern Europe had to worship in secret. The cathedral represented both spiritual solace and institutional power. The cathedral mattered because it was Barcelona's spiritual heart, the seat of the archbishop, and a symbol of continuity stretching back to medieval times. While political institutions were destroyed, the church endured, and for many Barcelonans, the cathedral represented a connection to the past that Madrid couldn't erase. Over time, the cathedral was completed and restored. The neo-Gothic facade was finally finished in 1913, based on medieval plans. Today, the cathedral remains active, offering daily services and attracting thousands of visitors. You can enter the cloister and see the 13 geese still wandering among the fountains and orange trees, a living tradition that connects today's Barcelona directly to the medieval city and the 18th century worshippers who walked these same stones. This is the port of Barcelona and the waterfront. By the 1760s, Barcelona's port was experiencing a revival despite the city's political troubles. This view shows the harbour crowded with ships, xebecs and feluccas with lateen sails, larger merchant vessels from across the Mediterranean and Atlantic. In the foreground, longshoremen haul crates of colonial goods onto the docks, sugar from Cuba, tobacco from Venezuela, cacao from Mexico. In the midground, shipwrights repair vessels in dry docks. Customs officials inspect cargo. The royal shipyard, the Drassanes, rises in the background, medieval Gothic arches now housing naval workshops. The air smells of tar, salt water, and exotic spices. The waterfront was rough and dangerous. Sailors from different nations, Spaniards, Catalans, Genoese, French, competed for work and fought in taverns. Smuggling was rampant as merchants tried to avoid the heavy taxes imposed by Madrid. Pirates from North Africa occasionally raided coastal areas, and fear of Barbary corsairs never fully disappeared. Disease arrived with ships, yellow fever, plague, cholera, and quarantine procedures were often inadequate. The port mattered enormously because it was Barcelona's economic lifeline. In 1778, Charles III finally opened direct trade between Catalonia and the Americas, breaking Seville's centuries-old monopoly. Barcelona's merchants seized the opportunity, investing in colonial trade and textile manufacturing for American markets. The port became the engine of Barcelona's 18th century recovery, transforming the city from occupied fortress town into emerging industrial center. Over time, the port expanded dramatically. New docks and breakwaters were built in the 1800s and 1900s. The waterfront shifted from commercial shipping toward leisure and tourism. Today, Barcelona's port is one of the Mediterranean's busiest, combining cruise ship terminals, marinas, and commercial facilities. The medieval Drassanes now houses the Maritime Museum. You can walk along the modern waterfront, past the World Trade Center and Mare Magnum Mall, and still sense the maritime heritage that made Barcelona great. This view shows Caramontcada and the merchant palaces. By the 1740s, Caramontcada was home to Barcelona's wealthiest merchant families. This view shows the narrow medieval street lined with Gothic palaces, tall stone buildings with interior courtyards and external staircases. In the foreground, a merchant family descends from their carriage, servants opening the palace doors. In the midground, the palace facades display their wealth-carved stone doorways, wrought iron balconies, coats of arms above entrances. These families, the Berengar, the Aguilar, the Dalmaces, made fortunes in textiles, colonial trade and shipping. The street is quiet, exclusive, far removed from the poverty of the working districts. Life here was one of privilege but also anxiety. Merchant wealth depended on fragile trade networks, volatile markets, and political favor. The Bourbon regime imposed new taxes and regulations that threatened profits. Competition was fierce, and business failures could lead to bankruptcy and disgrace. Social climbing was ruthless. Families competed for noble titles and royal appointments, knowing that status depended on Madrid's approval. Caramoncada mattered because these merchant families would drive Barcelona's 18th and 19th century transformation. Their capital funded the factories and workshops that made Barcelona Spain's industrial leader. Their children would become the Catalan bourgeoisie who revived Catalan culture in the 1800s. The wealth concentrated on this street represented Barcelona's future, not its occupied present. Over time, many palaces were sold or converted to other uses. Some became tenements as wealthy families moved to newer districts, but their architecture survived. Today, Caramoncada houses several museums, most famously the Picasso Museum, spread across 5 medieval palaces. You can enter these buildings and walk through the Gothic courtyards and stone staircases that 18th century merchant princes climbed daily, experiencing the grandeur that defined Barcelona's elite. This is Barceloneta, the fisherman's neighborhood by the 1750s. Barceloneta was a brand new neighborhood, built to house the families displaced by Las Ciudadelas construction. This view shows the grid of streets laid out on a triangular peninsula, jutting into the sea. In the foreground, fishermen mend nets on the beach. Women gut fish and hang them to dry. In the midground, the neighborhood's low, uniform houses stretch in neat rows, simple 2-story buildings designed by military engineer Juan Martin Semino to house the working poor efficiently and cheaply. Laundry hangs from every window. Children play in the streets. The smell of fish and sea air is overwhelming. Barceloneta was poor and overcrowded from the start. The houses were too small for the families crammed into them. Sanitation was primitive open sewers, no running water, shared wells. Disease spread quickly. In summer, the heat was suffocating. In winter, the wind off the sea was brutal. The neighborhood was isolated from the rest of Barcelona, separated by walls and the citadel, leaving residents feeling like second-class citizens in their own city. Barceloneta mattered because it represented both Barcelona's working-class resilience and the regime's contempt for the poor. The neighborhood was designed for control, easy to monitor, with straight streets that military patrols could oversee. But Barceloneta's residents created a tight-knit community, preserving Catalan language and traditions despite Spanish suppression. The neighborhood became a center of working-class culture and resistance. Over time, Barceloneta evolved from slum to beloved neighborhood. The fishing industry declined, replaced by restaurants and bars. The 1992 Olympics brought redevelopment and gentrification. Today, Barceloneta is known for its beaches, seafood restaurants, and narrow streets lined with colorful buildings. You can still see the original street grid Semino designed and walk the same beach where 18th century fishermen hauled their nets, though now it's covered with sunbathers and tourists rather than fishing boats. This view shows the textile workshops and early manufactories. By the 1770s, Barcelona was becoming Spain's textile manufacturing center. This view shows one of the growing number of workshops in the Raval district. In the foreground, workers operate hand looms, weaving cotton and wool into cloth. The rhythmic clack of the looms fills the air. In the midground, children, some as young as 7 or 8, sort raw materials and run errands. The workshop owner supervises from a raised platform. Bales of raw cotton imported from the Americas fill one corner. Finished cloth is stacked, ready for shipment. The air is thick with cotton dust and the smell of dye. Conditions were harsh. Workers labored 12 to 14 hours a day for meager wages. Children were employed because their small hands could thread the looms more easily. Accidents were common: fingers crushed, hands mangled by machinery. Ventilation was poor, leading to lung diseases. Worker organizing was forbidden, and strikes were crushed by military force. The prosperity these workshops brought to Barcelona came at a terrible human cost. The textile industry mattered because it drove Barcelona's economic transformation. Protected by royal tariffs and supplied by colonial cotton, Barcelona's manufacturers grew wealthy. The city became Spain's industrial leader, surpassing Madrid in productivity and innovation. The wealth generated here would fund the 19th century expansion that transformed Barcelona into a modern metropolis. Over time, the early workshops grew into massive factories. The Industrial Revolution brought steam power and mechanization. Worker movements arose, demanding rights and protections. Today, Barcelona's textile industry has largely disappeared, moved to cheaper labor markets. But you can visit the Museum of Catalan History to see recreated workshops and learn about the workers whose labor built the modern city. Some old factory buildings survive, converted to cultural centers and apartments. their brick walls and high windows reminders of Barcelona's industrial past. This is the city walls and gates. By the 1750s, Barcelona was still completely enclosed by walls, medieval fortifications, reinforced and expanded by the Bourbons. This view shows the walls stretching along the western edge of the city, with one of the main gates in the center. In the foreground, farmers and merchants queue to enter the city, their carts inspected by customs officials who collect tolls. Guards in Spanish uniforms stand at the gate, checking papers and searching for contraband. In the midground, the walls rise 15 feet high, topped with ramparts where sentries patrol. Beyond the walls, open fields extend toward the mountains. The sound of the gate opening and closing echoes constantly. The walls were both protection and prison. They defended against attack but also trapped residents inside, preventing the city from expanding. Overcrowding was chronic. The gates closed at night, leaving anyone outside stranded until dawn. Smugglers used the walls to their advantage, hiding goods in secret passages. The walls also made Barcelona feel like an occupied city, a fortress, where Spanish troops controlled every entrance and exit. The walls mattered because they defined Barcelona's physical and psychological boundaries. The city couldn't grow outward, forcing density upward and inward. Tension mounted as population recovered. By the 1780s. Barcelona approached 100,000 residents, all crammed within the same medieval boundaries. Pressure for expansion grew, but Madrid resisted, fearing that a larger Barcelona would be harder to control. In the 1850s, the walls were finally demolished as Barcelona expanded into the Eixample district. The liberation was celebrated with bonfires and festivities, decades of pent-up frustration released as the stones came down. Today, nothing remains of the walls except their outline visible in the street plan. The old city Ciutat Vella is still defined by where the walls stood, and a few street names like Ronda, meaning round, for the paths that circled the walls, remind us of the fortifications that once enclosed Barcelona like a cage. This view shows the Mercat del Born, the central market. By the 1760s, the Born neighborhood, despite the destruction caused by the citadel's construction, was rebuilding around its market. This view shows the open-air market square, crowded with stalls and vendors. In the foreground, a fruit seller displays oranges and figs from Valencia. A butcher hangs meat from iron hooks. In the midground, crowds jostle between stall servants buying for wealthy households, working people purchasing the day's meals. The ironwork roof structure that would be built in the 1870s doesn't exist yet. This is simply an open plaza. The air smells of fresh produce, meat, and human sweat. The market was lively but also tense. Disputes over prices and quality led to shouting matches. Pickpockets worked the crowds. Food shortages caused by poor harvests or naval blockades during wars led to panic and sometimes riots when vendors raised prices. Spanish soldiers patrolled the market, enforcing order but also reminding everyone of the occupation. Merchants who spoke Catalan too loudly risked harassment. The Born market mattered because it was where Barcelona fed itself. The market drew produce from the surrounding countryside, fish from the coast, and imported goods from the port. It was also a social center where news spread, where politics were discussed in whispers, where Barcelona's community maintained itself despite oppression. The market represented daily life continuing, resilience through routine. Over time, the market evolved. A magnificent iron structure was built in 1876, creating one of Europe's most beautiful market halls. It operated until 1971, then sat abandoned for decades. In the 2000s, during renovation, archaeological excavations uncovered the ruins of 1700s houses destroyed for the citadel, preserving a slice of the neighborhood that was lost. Today, El Born Center Cultural houses these ruins and serves as a museum focused on 1700s Barcelona. You can walk on glass platforms above the excavated streets and see the foundations of houses where families lived during the age of occupation, a direct connection to the city this video describes. This is the church and monastery of Santa Maria del Mar. By the 1770s, Santa Maria del Mar was already 5 centuries old, its soaring Gothic arches dominating the Ribera district. This view shows the church from the square in front, its simple facade contrasting with the elaborate interior. In the foreground, stevedores from the nearby port attend mass. The church was built by and for Barcelona's maritime workers. In the midground, the 3 naves rise behind the facade, supported by slender columns that create an unusually open interior space. Light streams through the rose window. The sound of plainchant echoes within. The church represented the people's faith, distinct from the establishment power of the cathedral. Santa Maria del Mar was built without aristocratic or royal patronage, funded entirely by merchants, craftsmen, and dock workers. This made it a symbol of Barcelona's identity, of a community that built grandeur through collective effort. But the church also suffered during the 1714 siege, bombarded and damaged, a casualty of Barcelona's resistance. Santa Maria del Mar mattered because it embodied the soul of Barcelona's working people. While the political institutions were destroyed and the language suppressed, the church stood as proof that Barcelona's community endured. Generations baptized, married, and mourned here, maintaining continuity through occupation. The church survived wars, fires, and revolutions. During the Spanish Civil War in 1936, it was set ablaze by anarchists, and much of the interior was destroyed, but the structure survived and was restored. Today, Santa Maria del Mar is one of Barcelona's most visited churches, celebrated for its Gothic purity and its connection to the city's maritime heritage. You can enter and stand beneath the soaring arches, in the same space where 18th century dock workers prayed, and feel the continuity of faith and community that no occupation could break. Standing here now, looking at these reconstructed images, it's astonishing how Barcelona's 18th century feels both distant and immediate. A city under occupation, stripped of its freedoms, yet refusing to disappear instead, quietly rebuilding its economy, preserving its culture, and waiting for the moment when it could reclaim its identity. The walls are gone, the citadel demolished, the suppression ended, but the streets remain, the churches endure, and the spirit of resistance that defined 1700s Barcelona still pulses through the city today. If there's another city, another moment, or another scene you'd like me to bring to life using AI reconstruction, let me know in the comments. I'd love to explore it with you. Again, thank you so much.